Mommy, it burns. It burns so bad. My 6-year-old daughter Sophie was screaming and rolling on our lawn. Her hair was smoking from acid. Our HOA president Karen stood there smiling, holding an empty drain cleaner bottle. She had no idea I'm a federal judge. I ran outside in my pajamas and saw the most horrifying sight of my life. Sophie was covered in some kind of chemical that was burning her skin. She was crying and trying to wipe it off, but that was making it worse. Standing on the sidewalk with an empty bottle in her hand was Karen Peterson, our HOA president. She had a satisfied smile on her face as she watched my daughter suffer. "What did you do to my baby?" I screamed at Karen. "I taught her a lesson about keeping her toys off my sidewalk," Karen said coldly. "Maybe next time she'll listen when I tell her to clean up her mess." Sophie had left her chalk and bubbles on the public sidewalk after playing yesterday. For this, Karen had poured drain cleaner on my 6-year-old daughter. I scooped Sophie up and ran toward the house. "Call 911. Call 911 now," I yelled to my husband Mark. Sophie's skin was burning from the acid. My little girl was in agony because of this monster's idea of teaching a lesson. What Karen didn't know was that I'm federal judge Rebecca Martinez, and she had just committed a federal crime against my child. Mark called 911 while I rushed Sophie to the shower. I had to wash the chemicals off her skin immediately or the damage would be permanent. "Sophie, sweetheart, I need to wash you with lots of water. It's going to help stop the burning." "Mommy, it hurts so much. Why did that lady hurt me? I was just playing." My heart was breaking as I gently washed the acid off my daughter's burns. Sophie had never hurt anyone in her life. She was the sweetest little girl who spent her days drawing with chalk and blowing bubbles. The paramedics arrived within minutes. They immediately started treating Sophie's chemical burns while I gave them information about what happened. "Ma'am, do you know what chemical was used?" the paramedic asked. "The neighbor used some kind of drain cleaner. She poured it directly on my daughter. We need to get her to the hospital immediately. Chemical burns can cause permanent damage if not treated quickly." As they loaded Sophie into the ambulance, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Mommy, am I going to be okay?" "Yes, baby girl. The doctors are going to take good care of you. And Mommy is going to make sure the bad lady never hurts anyone again." Sophie was rushed into the emergency room where doctors immediately began treating her burns. She had second-degree chemical burns on her face, arms, and hands. "Mrs. Martinez," Dr. Johnson explained, "your daughter is going to be okay, but she'll need surgery to prevent scarring on her face. We also need to monitor her for several days to make sure there's no internal damage from chemical inhalation." Mark held my hand as we watched our little girl hooked up to machines and covered in bandages. Sophie looked so small and fragile in that hospital bed. "Daddy, when can I go home?" Sophie asked weakly. "Soon, princess. You need to rest and let the doctors help you feel better." While Sophie slept, I stepped outside to make some very important phone calls. As a federal judge, I had access to resources that most parents don't have. My first call was to FBI Agent Thompson, who I had worked with on many cases. "Agent Thompson, this is Judge Martinez. I need to report a federal crime. Someone just committed assault with a dangerous weapon against my 6-year-old daughter. Judge, we'll have agents there within the hour. Don't let anyone touch the crime scene." FBI agents arrived at the hospital to take my statement while local police secured our house and the crime scene. "Judge Martinez," Agent Thompson said, "we've arrested Karen Peterson at her home. We found 3 more bottles of drain cleaner in her garage, along with notes about neighborhood children she considered problematic." "Notes about other children?" "Yes, ma'am. She had a list of 6 families with young kids, including detailed complaints about normal childhood activities like riding bikes, playing with chalk, and laughing too loudly. This wasn't just about Sophie's toys on the sidewalk. Karen had been planning attacks on multiple children in our neighborhood." "Agent Thompson, I want to be clear about something. I'm not just a concerned parent right now. As a federal judge, I'm formally requesting that this case be prosecuted to the fullest extent of federal law." "Understood, Your Honor. We're treating this as domestic terrorism targeting children." The FBI was taking this seriously because Karen had used chemical weapons against a child, which made it a federal crime. While I was at the hospital with Sophie, Karen was being arrested at her home. According to the police report, she showed no remorse whatsoever. "I don't understand what the big deal is," Karen told the arresting officers. "I used a little cleaning product to teach a child about respecting other people's property." "Ma'am, you poured acid on a 6-year-old. That's attempted murder." "It wasn't acid. It was just drain cleaner. There's a difference." Karen clearly didn't understand that drain cleaner is acid, and that she had just admitted to assault with a chemical weapon. When the FBI agents informed her that Sophie's mother was a federal judge, Karen's attitude changed completely. Wait, she's a judge? I didn't know that. This is all a misunderstanding. Ma'am, ignorance of your victim's profession doesn't change the fact that you chemically burned a child. Karen was charged with assault with a dangerous weapon, child endangerment, domestic terrorism, and federal crimes related to chemical attacks. The next morning, Sophie had surgery to minimize scarring from the chemical burns. Mark and I waited in the hospital hallway, praying that our little girl would heal completely. Dr. Johnson came out after 3 hours. The surgery went well. We were able to clean all the damaged tissue and apply skin grafts. Sophie should heal with minimal scarring. Will she be in pain for long? I asked. Children heal faster than adults. With proper care, she should be back to normal activities in about 6 weeks. But she'll need to stay out of direct sunlight for several months while her new skin develops. When Sophie woke up from surgery, she was groggy but alert. Mommy, do I look scary now? You look beautiful, sweetheart. You're the bravest little girl in the whole world. Will the mean lady go to jail for hurting me? Yes, baby. She's going to jail for a very long time. I meant it. As a federal judge, I knew exactly how much trouble Karen was in. News of the attack spread quickly through our neighborhood. People were horrified that Karen had used acid on a child over sidewalk chalk. Mrs. Williams from across the street came to the hospital with flowers. Judge Martinez, we had no idea Karen was capable of something like this. We're all praying for Sophie. Has Karen bothered your children? I asked. She's complained about my kids riding bikes in front of her house. Last week she threatened to teach them a lesson about making noise, but we never thought she meant this. More neighbors came forward with stories about Karen's threats against their children. The FBI was building a case that showed a pattern of escalating violence toward kids. Mr. Johnson, who lived next door to Karen, revealed the most disturbing information. I saw her buying drain cleaner at the hardware store yesterday. She bought 6 bottles and told the cashier she was going to solve her neighborhood problem once and for all. Karen had been planning a multi-child attack. Sophie was just the first victim. The U.S. Attorney's Office filed federal charges against Karen Peterson that carried serious prison time. Assault with a chemical weapon, 20 years. Domestic terrorism, 25 years. Child endangerment, 10 years. Premeditated assault, 15 years. Conspiracy to commit violence against multiple children, 20 years. Your Honor, U.S. Attorney Davis told me, this is one of the most serious cases we've seen involving attacks on children. We're seeking the maximum sentence on all charges. I'll be recusing myself from this case due to my personal involvement, but I want you to know that I support full prosecution. We understand. Judge Williams will be handling the case, and she's known for her tough stance on crimes against children. Judge Williams was perfect for this case. She had sent child abusers to prison for decades and had no tolerance for violence against kids. After 5 days in the hospital, Sophie was finally able to come home. Her bandages covered most of her face and arms, but she was excited to be back in her own room. Mommy, can I still play with chalk when I get better? Of course, sweetheart. You can play with anything you want. No one will ever hurt you for being a kid again. The FBI had installed security cameras around our house and assigned protection detail until Karen's trial was over. They weren't taking any chances with more revenge attacks. Sophie's first day home, she received over 200 get-well cards from children around the country who had heard her story on the news. Kids were sending drawings, toys, and letters telling her to stay strong. Look, Mommy. This little boy from Texas sent me his favorite teddy bear because he heard I was hurt. Seeing Sophie smile again was the best medicine for my broken heart. Karen was being held without bail because the judge considered her a danger to children in the community. Her lawyer tried to argue that she was just a concerned neighbor who made a mistake. Your Honor, Karen's defense attorney said, my client was trying to teach children about respecting property. She didn't intend to cause serious harm. Judge Williams was not impressed. Counselor, your client poured industrial drain cleaner on a 6-year-old child. Intent doesn't matter when the action was inherently dangerous and cruel. Karen still didn't seem to understand the severity of what she had done. In jail interviews, she kept complaining about how unfair her treatment was. I'm the victim here, Karen told a reporter. These people have turned me into a monster just because I tried to maintain neighborhood standards. The reporter asked, do you regret hurting Sophie? I regret that people are overreacting to a simple discipline issue. Karen's complete lack of remorse was going to hurt her badly at trial. Karen's trial began 3 months after the attack. The courtroom was packed with neighbors, FBI agents, and media covering the shocking case. Sophie, now mostly healed but with some visible scarring on her cheek, was allowed to give a brief statement to the court with me beside her. "The mean lady hurt me really bad because I left my chalk outside," Sophie said in her small voice. "I don't understand why grown-ups want to hurt kids for playing." Judge Williams leaned down to Sophie's level. "Sweetheart, what that lady did was very wrong. Grown-ups should protect children, not hurt them." "I know. My mommy protects kids every day because she's a judge too." The courtroom was silent. Everyone could see the innocence and confusion in Sophie's eyes about why an adult would attack her. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence against Karen. Video footage from neighbors' security cameras showing the attack. Chemical analysis proving the drain cleaner caused Sophie's burns. Karen's notebook detailing plans to discipline neighborhood children. Witness testimony about Karen's threats against multiple families. Expert testimony about the permanent damage chemical burns can cause. Karen's defense tried to claim she was mentally ill and didn't understand her actions. But the prosecution showed that Karen had been planning this attack for weeks. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the prosecutor said, "this was not a moment of madness. This was premeditated chemical warfare against a 6-year-old child who was guilty of nothing more than being a kid." The evidence was so strong that Karen's lawyer advised her to take a plea deal. Karen refused, still believing she had done nothing wrong. Dr. Sarah Chin, a pediatric burn specialist, testified about Sophie's injuries and treatment. Sophie suffered second-degree chemical burns over 15% of her body, Dr. Chin explained. If her mother hadn't acted quickly to wash off the chemicals, Sophie could have died from chemical poisoning. In your professional opinion, could these injuries have been accidental? Absolutely not. The pattern of burns shows that a large amount of concentrated acid was deliberately poured on the child from above. This was intentional and could have been fatal. A child psychologist also testified about the emotional trauma Sophie had experienced. Sophie has developed anxiety about playing outside and fear of adult strangers, Dr. Martinez explained. She's a 6-year-old who now associates normal childhood activities with danger. This will require years of therapy to overcome. Karen showed no emotion during any of this testimony about the damage she had caused. Against her lawyer's advice, Karen insisted on testifying in her own defense. It was a disaster for her case. "I was just trying to maintain property values in our neighborhood," Karen said on the witness stand. "Children these days have no respect for other people's property or peace and quiet." "Miss Peterson, do you believe a 6-year-old deserves to be burned with acid for leaving toys on a sidewalk?" "I didn't use acid. I used drain cleaner." "Drain cleaner is acid, Miss Peterson." "Well, nobody told me that." The prosecutor pressed harder. "Do you feel any remorse for nearly killing a child?" "I feel sorry that everyone is overreacting to a simple neighborhood dispute." Karen's testimony convinced the jury that she was dangerous and unrepentant. Her own words sealed her fate. After only 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict: guilty on all counts. Karen's face went white as Judge Williams read each guilty verdict. She finally seemed to understand that her life was over. "The jury has found you guilty of assault with a chemical weapon, domestic terrorism, child endangerment and conspiracy," Judge Williams announced. "You will be sentenced next week." Sophie was in the courtroom for the verdict. When she heard guilty, she squeezed my hand and whispered, "Does this mean she can't hurt any more kids?" "That's exactly what it means, sweetheart." Karen was led away in handcuffs, finally crying as she realized she would spend the rest of her life in prison for attacking a child with acid. 1 week later, Judge Williams sentenced Karen Peterson to life in prison without the possibility of parole. "Miss Peterson," Judge Williams said, "you committed an act of domestic terrorism against a 6-year-old child. You showed no remorse, no understanding of the severity of your actions, and no concern for the permanent damage you caused." "Your Honor, please. I made a mistake. I'll never do it again." "A mistake is forgetting to turn off the stove. What you did was pour acid on a kindergartner because she left chalk on a sidewalk. You are a danger to children and society." The sentence was the harshest possible under federal law. Karen would die in prison. Additionally, Judge Williams continued, "You are ordered to pay $2 million in damages to the Martinez family for medical expenses, therapy costs and pain and suffering." Karen collapsed in her chair. Her life of terrorizing children was finally over. 6 months after the attack, Sophie had healed remarkably well. The scarring on her face was minimal, and her spirit was as bright as ever. She had become something of a local hero, with children throughout the city sending her letters and gifts. Sophie started a kindness club at her school to help other kids who were being bullied. "Mommy, I want to help kids who are scared like I was," Sophie told me. "Maybe when I grow up, I can be a judge like you and protect children from mean people." My heart swelled with pride. My daughter had turned her trauma into a mission to help others. Sophie also received recognition from the Children's Protection Society for her bravery in testifying against Karen. She was invited to speak at schools about standing up to bullies and telling trusted adults when someone hurts you. With Karen gone forever, our neighborhood became a completely different place. Families felt safe letting their children play outside again. The new HOA president, Mrs. Johnson, implemented child-friendly policies. No complaints about normal childhood noise. No restrictions on children playing in public areas. Mandatory background checks for all HOA board members. A children's rights policy protecting kids from adult harassment. The neighborhood organized a Sophie Sidewalk Art Festival, where children could draw with chalk anywhere they wanted. Sophie was the guest of honor and drew a beautiful rainbow that stretched across 3 sidewalk squares. "This is for all the kids who just want to play and be happy," Sophie announced to the crowd of neighbors and media. Sophie's case led to new federal legislation called Sophie's Law, which increased penalties for chemical attacks against children and expanded the definition of domestic terrorism to include targeting kids. I was invited to speak to Congress about the need for stronger protections for children in neighborhood disputes. Sophie was attacked because a grown woman decided that a child's right to play was less important than her desire for control, I told the congressional committee. "We must send a clear message that children have the right to be children without fear of adult violence." Sophie's Law passed unanimously and was signed by the president. My daughter's suffering had led to better protection for all children. 2 years after the attack, Sophie is now 8 years old and thriving. She plays outside fearlessly, makes friends easily, and dreams of becoming either a judge or a children's doctor. "I want to help kids like the doctors helped me," she says. "Or I want to put bad people in jail like Mommy does." Karen is serving her life sentence at a federal prison where she's been placed in protective custody. Other inmates don't react well to people who hurt children. She'll never see freedom again. Our family has healed stronger than before. Sophie learned that justice exists and that good people will always protect children from monsters. The neighborhood has become a model community for child safety. 3 families with young children have moved here specifically because they heard about our child protection policies. What started as a horrific acid attack on an innocent child became a story of justice, healing, and systemic change to protect all children. Karen lost everything: her freedom, her life, and any chance of redemption. She chose to see a playing child as an enemy and paid the ultimate price. Sophie gained national recognition, federal legislation in her name, and the knowledge that when bad things happen, good people will fight for justice. Our community learned that protecting children requires vigilance and action, not just good intentions. The justice wasn't just Karen going to prison forever, it was watching Sophie grow up confident and kind, knowing she had changed the world for other children. Today, when Sophie draws with chalk on the sidewalk, she always includes the words "Kids Welcome Here" in bright, colorful letters. The sidewalk where she was attacked is now covered with children's art, laughter, and joy. Evil tried to destroy a child's innocence, but love and justice created something beautiful instead. Sophie often tells people, "A very mean lady tried to hurt me, but she couldn't destroy my happiness." And now no mean lady can hurt any kid again because of Sophie's Law. That's the strongest victory any parent could ask for, a child who turned her pain into protection for others. The acid is gone, but Sophie's strength remains forever.